All right, back with another programming video because you've been liking them so much. Today we're going to map out a 4-day weightlifting cycle or Olympic weightlifting. So my whole S&C model actually emerged from my weightlifting model, which was basically a more strength and conditioning oriented approach to the training of weightlifters, hence, the whole general physical preparation side of things. And when I started sharing all this information online, weightlifters tend to be a little bit more closed-minded. I ended up just getting way more traction on the S&C side of things. So naturally just sort of went that way. But I know I've still got a decent amount of weightlifters following me, so this one's for you guys. And even if you've never done a snatch or clean and jerk in your life and you don't plan on doing it, you'll still get plenty of takeaways from this video because at the end of the day, all these principles are somewhat generally applied. You're going to see a lot of our classic GPP style programming staples here today. Golden microcycle, running a thread of all qualities in the same week. Everything's highly individualized, so we'll try to come up with a hypothetical weightlifter to drive our decision-making process. And one of the topics that I really wanted to emphasize in the discussion for today's video is the application of RPE-based training for weightlifters. So this is something that I've pushed a lot and I've had a lot of great success with, but I also think a lot of weightlifters, they overcomplicate it and they're scared of trying to apply concepts such as RIR or RPE to their Olympic weightlifting training. I've had a lot of success applying not just RPE, but just general, a lot of auto-regulation practices to all my Olympic weightlifters and my own Olympic weightlifting training. So I'll be exploring that in detail today, not just how we apply RPE generally to, obviously our squats and then our accessory exercises, also how we can apply RPE to the competition lifts, and also a couple of substitutes for RPE that still embody the principles of auto-regulation. Because at the end of the day, that's what we stand for here at General Physical Preparation. It's always principles over methods. At the end of the day, RPE is just a method for applying the principle of auto-regulation. So we just think that every athlete should have some form of auto-regulation in their training. The degree of auto-regulation in everyone's programming is very individualized and dependent on where they're at in their training or coaching journey. A reminder as always, if you want to become a master in applying the concepts we're discussing here today, check out GPP Level 1. There's a link for that down below. Anyway, let's get into the video. Okay, so here we have our blank 4-day programming spreadsheet. Just to give us a bit of direction with this 4-day microcycle, we're going to pretend that this athlete has a leg strength deficiency. So Olympic weightlifting athletes still wants their snatch and clean and jerk to come up, but maybe they've just been getting buried on the recovery of heavy cleans or something like that. So got a general focus on all of the qualities, at least a minimum effective dose of those, but then a little bit of the bias dialed towards squat strength. So typically my weightlifters, when they're not in a leg strength phase, they'll squat 2 times a week. Likely it'll be either a front squat or a back squat and then a machine squat, or maybe it'll be a front squat or a back squat. Some will run 2 front squat. But typically when we're in a leg strength focused phase, I'll often bump that up to 3 times a week, but one of those will almost always be a machine squat. I think it's really underutilized by Olympic weightlifters. Powerlifters love machine squat variations on secondary and tertiary squat days, or even as an accessory movement. Not enough weightlifters are using them. I mean, a lot of weightlifting gyms unfortunately don't even have machine squats, but if you are in a weightlifting gym with no machine squats, Hatfield squats are a great option as well. All right, so whenever we're making something a focus, we're going to put it on day 1 of the program, just rip straight into it first thing of the week. But of course, we can't forget about our signature GPP plyo warm-up. I did warn you guys that you'd be seeing a lot of GPP staples, and here it is. We just dish out the same plyo warm-up to basically all our athletes. It is individualized as far as the specific dose, the variations you get, and how many times you get it per week. Like, it's not in absolutely every session, but for this weightlifter, I'll probably give it to him every session. A little bit of jumping 4 times a week does amazing things for just the general physical preparation of your weightlifters. They're athletes and you've got to treat them and train them like athletes. I know you guys are dying for me to put pen to paper with this program at this point, but there's one other thing I want to get out of the way. Since coaches like myself have popularized this more strength and conditioning approach to Olympic weightlifting, there's almost like a split in the weightlifting community now where some coaches are out there saying like, oh, if you're not doing plyos as a weightlifter, or how the hell do you expect to make progress? I'm sort of just presenting this as this is how we like to do it at General Physical Preparation. I'm a big fan of the Bulgarian method, not in terms of training that way. I just think it was a really interesting and productive experiment. So if you love your weightlifting and your training's going great and all you want to do is snatch, clean and jerk and squat, like you don't even want to do accessories, I think that's amazing. I just love it when people are fired up about training. But some of the main reasons we approach training with the more general S&C approach that we do here at General Physical Preparation is because we personally find it a little bit more enjoyable than just doing the same 3 things over and over again. I'd argue it's better for general health and like avoid avoiding overuse injuries, just developing more general qualities. I think there's a protective aspect to them. I also think that this is a lot closer to a quote unquote traditional approach to weightlifting for people who are starting out their weightlifting journey. I think, you know, the average person in the West, they find weightlifting as an adult. They don't start as a youth. And when you look at how they train youth weightlifters traditionally, there is this big general physical preparation emphasis. Whereas a lot of people who find weightlifting in their 20s or even their 30s, they don't have this broad base of GPP to draw upon, and they just dive into this highly specific training. Like there's such a culture in weightlifting of, oh, if you want to be a real weightlifter, you know, you got to be squatting 5 times a week, you got to be snatching and clean and jerking every single workout, otherwise you're not serious. And programming like that just chews people up and spits them out when they don't have, like I said, just properly developed general physical qualities. So yeah, as much as even I am guilty of often framing this as a non-traditional approach to weightlifting, there's also, you know, in some ways this strong argument to be made that this is a real traditional approach to introducing a lot of athletes to weightlifting. Where I sort of break tradition is I have also applied this to higher level weightlifting athletes as well. Coach guy, shout out to Dylan. He's a 150 kilo snatcher, 186 kilo clean and jerker. And what you'll see today isn't exactly his program, but it'll be like very close to the sort of doses of general training that I've got him doing as well. You know, obviously I have to be pretty GPP pilled. My whole brand's general physical preparation, but yeah, I really enjoy applying this style of Olympic lifting programming to weightlifters of all capabilities. All right, let's get into it. So we need some sort of leaping variation to kick it off. So we'll go crescendo leaps. So crescendo leap, say to set of 10, you'll start out on rep 1 with a really small leap 2-legged jump, and then by rep 5 you'll be doing a really intense leap, and then you'll start to decrescendo, so your 10th repetition is a really light leap again as well. And what we're developing here, we're warming up, but we're also just developing a little bit of dynamic range. It's just a really nice leaping variation. 2 to 3 sets. I actually like high rep sets of these, again, just because it forces a lot of these less experienced plyometric athletes to develop more of a medium intensity. Or in this case, where we're still doing an intense leap at the peak of our crescendo, it'll give them more space between that light leap and that intense leap to explore that medium range, which is a big goal for this drill and why I prescribe it to almost everyone. I'm trying to teach them medium tier because medium intensity is where I do the majority of plyometrics with my athletes. And then I want some sort of easy hopping variation, so maybe light backwards hops, so hopping, continuous jumping on one leg. Going backwards usually just makes people dial back the intensity a little bit. Always lower reps when it's hopping, just because people's technique usually degrade. When they're not that experienced, they won't be able to chain together nice reps with a good amount of cycling of the leg and building momentum. So on the lower end of the rep ranges, still keeping it warm-up intensity. Okay, that'll be really productive. All right, to mix things up today, I'm going to show you guys a new variation of the top set and back off method. So we're going to do front squat, a top single, go RPE 7 to 8. So on the upper end of the intensity for a top set. And then I'm actually going to leave space for a little bit of snatch and clean and jerk work. And then after that, we're going to get into our back off sets, but we're going to do that on a machine squat. So I'm going to prescribe either a hack or pendulum, or if you don't have access to a machine squat, again, you could do your Hatfield squat. I pray you have an SSB bar. If you don't have machine squat options and you don't even have an SSB bar in your weightlifting gym, beg your coach to buy one of those. It's 2026. Weightlifters should be doing machine squats. And because we've got our external stability, it's a really good opportunity to push the intensity here. Also, we're looking at this, you know, we don't run a strict high-low model here at general physical preparation. We're actually bookending the week with our higher sessions, then we've scooped out the middle of the week to be our faster, sort of lighter intensity in terms of absolute load sessions. So go 8 to a 9 here, sort of, you know, trying to get closer to that 9. I just don't want anyone getting actually stapled in the hack squat. And so for this program, we're not going to go absolute lowest dose, like what I would consider a maintenance dose of skill work for the competition lifts. We're going to be a little bit above that because this is the sort of block where if the athlete was, you know, we're definitely making leg strength an emphasis and the primary focus, but not so much that there's not enough space to potentially hit some snatch and clean and jerk PRs coming out of this block at the same time. So bearing that in mind, if you're really sick of the Olympic lifts, you could go lower than this and maintain your Olympic lifts. Like, for example, Dylan, my athlete who snatches 150 kilos, we've just come out of a successful leg strength phase. He wanted to front squat 230 kilos. And now we're focused on chasing down a 190 kilo clean and jerk. So we've dialed back to a maintenance dose of squatting from 3 times a week down to 2 times a week, taking away a bunch of sets. We upped his dose of clean and jerk, but then we actually further reduced his dose of snatches because despite the fact that we haven't been focusing on the snatch, Dylan just is a naturally good snatcher. Even though I sort of hold this belief, and a lot of people talk about it in the weightlifting community, that a lot of people find snatches to be a little bit more technical. That's not everyone, and Dylan is just a really natural born snatcher. So what we had him doing was, I think 3 sets of power snatches on a Monday, some muscle snatches in the middle of the week, and then 1 snatch single on his big Saturday session as a bit of a warm-up or a primer for his big clean and jerk. And the plan was just to monitor the weight that he was hitting for his top set. And, I was coming into this sort of microcycle with Dylan thinking somewhere along the lines of like, okay, I just want to make sure that, he doesn't start missing 130 kilo snatches. We put so much work into making him a 150 kilo snatcher. And even though the snatch isn't the emphasis of this program, I don't want it to deteriorate, past a certain point. He ended up hitting all these like really easy, 140, 142 kilo snatches that honestly looked like, opener attempts in a competition. So we've reduced it even further. He's not snatching on the Monday at all. All he does is a couple of muscle snatches midweek and then 1 heavy snatch single on a Saturday. And we'll just monitor it. Like I'm totally open to everything. Is always an ongoing experiment with the way we program. If your snatch starts falling off a cliff, we'll just add more snatches back in on the primary day. But yeah, just to give you an insight into individualization and how we run things and how potentially low each athlete can go, it's highly individual when it comes to everything, but especially the competition lifts. All right, so with that being said, we'll give the athlete a little bit of space for auto-regulation. So we'll go 2 to 3 sets. I think that's another important thing to note. Often when we're talking about things in terms of auto-regulation, people's minds immediately just jump to RPE or just thinking about the intensity prescription. We can give our athletes space to auto-regulate even with our volume prescription. We'll go 2 to 3 sets of our clean and jerk variation as well. When I'm not in a phase with my weightlifters where I'm emphasizing the competition lifts, I often like to throw an increased amount of variation or constraints at them. If anything, just to have some fun and I guess, to lean into a little bit of Rob Gray differential learning maybe. Even if the specific constraint isn't doing anything for the development of the technique, which I think it potentially does, it also is just a really nice way of constraining load and making sure your lifters aren't going unnecessarily heavy all the time. You just give them a really tricky variation, for example, like no hook, no feet snatch. Good luck lifting any load there. We'll go unnecessarily cruel to go triples, so we'll go doubles at an RPE 7, power clean, push press. Love this variation when athletes are in a non-competition lift focus phase. And we'll just go singles there, 1+1. Push it a little bit higher. Most athletes will end up being pretty severely limited by their push press. And in terms of accessories, we're kind of going to end up treating this like our typical push workout. So we're going to put our Poliquin push downs in for the tricep variation. We'll get our cable lateral raises and then some core work. Let's go side bends. 2 to 3, 2 to 3. 2 to 3, training busy people, give them options to auto-regulate their accessories, less chance of them being skipped altogether. This might not seem significant, but we can talk about the all or nothing mindset all day, but if we don't integrate it conceptually into the programming, how are our athletes meant to practice it and believe in it? Like, I think small adjustments like this genuinely help with things like that. The athlete looking at just a monster list of accessories, being like, oh, screw this, I'm just going home, versus like, oh, right, so I can skip a set here or there. Maybe it promotes laziness, maybe it's meeting people where they're at. It just depends on the athlete. Okay, high RPE on these, and we'll just go moderate on the Smith machine side bends. We don't want to be too wrecked around the midsection the next day because we're going to get into a more acceleration-focused workout. Now, just to take a moment to open up this discussion on applying RPE to the training of Olympic weightlifters. So I'll just start at the start because some of you might not understand RPE-based training at all. All it is a subjective rating of intensity from 1 to 10. Or you could also think of it as reps in reserve. So the guy who adapted RPE, it was originally a 6 to 20 scale to subjectively rate the intensity of your aerobic workout or your cardio workout. The 6 to 20 is like the Borg scale. And it's sort of in reference to max heart rate, from 60 beats all the way up to about 200 beats. I think it's sort of meant to be a proxy of that. Anyway, a guy called Mike Tuchscherer adapted the RPE scale as a scale of 1 to 10. And so all it is a scale of 1 to 10 minus reps in reserve. So a lot of people talk about RPE and RIR being different things. They're the exact same thing according to the guy who came up with RPE for weightlifting. Now, this might seem a little bit hypocritical of me because I myself apply weightlifting in my own personalized way to the competition lifts, and I'll explain that in a second. So RPE 7, you should have 3 reps left in the tank. RPE 8, you should have 2 reps left in the tank. RPE 9 to 10, either complete failure or maybe leaving 1 rep in the tank. But yeah, so in the same way that I have special personalized ways with my athletes that I've adapted RPE for the competition lifts, if between you and your athletes in your coaching relationship, you want to pretend that RPE and reps in reserve are completely different things, that's all fine. It's just when you're discussing it online and you're discussing it with other people, understand that when you treat reps in reserve and RPE as different things, you're the odd one out. You're being weird and you're expecting people to just know your personalized coaching system. In the broader public discussion, RPE, RIR, the exact same thing. That's also how I practice them, except for the competition lift. The most practical way to apply RPE to the competition lifts, in my opinion, is to have RPE 6 look like a last warm-up at a competition. RPE 7 is something that looks like a first attempt. RPE 8 is something that looks like a second attempt, and RPE 9 to 10 is something that looks like a final competition attempt. So for example, for this 2 to 3 sets of doubles of no hook, no feet snatch, the last rep of each set should look something like a competition opener level of intensity. And we all know that a good athlete in a weightlifting competition, they're absolutely smoking their openers. Like an opener should be a number that you could hit on any given day. So this is a relatively easy snatch workout we've got here. Obviously, a push press isn't a competition lift, but again, it's sort of something that if you were in a push press competition, would look like a second attempt. And then further along the workout, more traditional application of RPE, just classic reps in reserve. So 1 to 2 reps in reserve on the machine squat, 1 rep in reserve, potentially no reps in reserve on all the accessories after that. Now, in my opinion, that's really simple, but it still overwhelms a lot of weightlifting athletes. And I think the reason for that is in the culture of weightlifting, the athlete just isn't used to thinking for themselves whatsoever. It's like, coach is up here, coach is king of everything, and they make all my decisions, and I'm down here, switch brain off, follow the program. I hate coaching those sorts of athletes, and I don't think it's the optimal coaching approach for the average person either. It's definitely something that needs to be coached into people, especially if they've had coaches who are just spoon feeding them or giving them no autonomy or any ability to auto-regulate or decision make in their own training. But self-awareness is such an important quality that auto-regulation helps you develop. It switches the athlete's brain on when they're training, and that's a good thing. And so it's not completely handing over the keys. As you can see, we've still got a lot of structure in the program, but we're not completely removing the athlete from the daily decision-making process. Because in my opinion, if you've been training for a couple of years with a decent coach and you can't find an RPE 7 on a set of 5 squats, there's a high likelihood that you're a complete pain in the ass to train. And you probably ask your coach a lot of annoying and neurotic questions all the time about things that don't even matter. Whereas developing an athlete that can confidently walk into a gym unsupervised and not even hit their RPE 7 on squats, actually mess up their load selection, accidentally hit an RPE 8.5 on squats, not have a panic attack, successfully communicate that with their coach and be like, hey, just updating you, overshot my squats a little bit today, just so you can maybe adjust my programming for next week, or just out of courtesy. That's an advanced athlete right there. Not someone who's having a complete meltdown because they're like, oh no, or was it RPE 7 or 8? Like, too neurotic. You're thinking about things and stressing about things that don't really matter. So just a couple of points to wrap up the big rant about RPE. 1, figuring out RPE 7, RPE 8, it's so easy. Even if you mess it up, it doesn't matter. Just tell your coach. I don't want to hear any of this, like, oh, RPE is so hard. No, you lack self-awareness to such a high degree that it's even more important for you to embrace some degree of RPE-based auto-regulation in your training so you can just develop some of that self-awareness and reduce your level of neuroticism. Failing that, we have a traffic light system. Remember, the method is RPE, the principle is auto-regulation. So if in the competition lifts, you still can't wrap your head around what an RPE 6 or a last warm-up should look like, or an RPE 7 and an opener should look like, we can just have the traffic light system, which is green, yellow, and red. We have green for an easy looking lift that you smoked. We have orange for a lift that started to look a little bit hard, and then red for something that really looked like your limit for that day. So really adaptable system. You can meet people where they're at with all forms and methods of auto-regulation. Implement some with your weightlifting athletes because it develops better athletes and it leads to better training decisions being made because it's just more collaborative. Core belief here at General Physical Preparation, all the best programming is collaborative to at least some degree. That's ultimately individualization, collaboration. They're synonyms when it comes to program design. I love all my weightlifting athletes doing some form of sprinting. Often we have a strong bias towards acceleration work because it's just much slower and it's much safer. Athletes tend to be a lot more tolerant to it. It also helps us with one of the classic complaints of a leg strength focused cycle for any weightlifting athlete. They complain that they come out of it feeling so much slower. Don't complain about strength training making you feel slower if you're not doing your weighted zoomies. So resisted sprinting is amazing for weightlifting athletes year round, not just when they're in a leg strength focused phase, but particularly I do think that is one of the benefits, not just of the resisted acceleration that we're going to have in this workout, but the plyometrics and all of that stuff. Even maintaining somewhat of a dose of the competition lifts. You got to keep your athletes moving fast, even when you're building strength. All right, so let's build it out. Actually, let's throw some labels on these days. Primary day just means big day. Acceleration theme. Light day to prep for big Friday or Saturday. Okay, cool. No arms. Arms, leaping, 3-point start, bounds, 5-meter accelerations. So I will bump these up to 10 meters later in later weeks. But if this is week one, I'll definitely start them out at 5 meters. It's safer, it's slower. It's just a great way to introduce them to it. Some athletes start overthinking the longer they have to sprint. So short sprints, it's like just throw the brain out, get into a good start position, and then just be aggressive. Sorry, specifically. So if you don't have access to a sprinting sled, you can use a prowler in the gym. They're often not great, but hill sprints, I would say, are the best option if you don't have a traditional sprint sled. Also, if you don't have a traditional sprint sled, it's one of the cheapest and best bits of equipment you can buy. Any sort of athlete, weightlifting athlete, field sports athlete, highly recommend you get a sprint sled. Especially for athletes who don't understand how to sprint or how to accelerate properly. Adding resistance actually makes the technical aspects of acceleration easier because it just slows you down a little bit. So with usual strength training, the more weight you add, the more difficult it gets. And it does get the propulsion and the speed gets more difficult with resisted sprinting the more weight you add, but the technical aspect of it gets easier because it slows you down. So you've just got so much more time to hit better positions and learn to interact with the ground more efficiently. Way less chance of you tearing a hammy when you're moving slower. So those higher loads for beginner sprinters, they have a protective quality to them as well. Stops you smashing your shins to bits because, again, so much of what ends up hurting your shins is all the extra velocity from, for example, unweighted sprinting. And all these are, so we're going to start in a 3-point start, which I think is great. We're going to start in a 2 or 3-point start. Honestly, I don't really give a shit. 2 to 3 warm-up sets of leaps. Let's just go 20 to keep the intensity low. Moderate. Okay, so starting to pick up the intensity a little bit with the 2 or 3-point start acceleration bounds, we call them, when we're starting from a standing start. So when I'm doing my locomotive plyos, I recommend either walking or jogging into the set to come into the set with a little bit of momentum. But then particularly when I'm doing resisted acceleration, I like to start those workouts with static start bounds. So alternating single leg jumps, and they feel really similar to especially resisted acceleration. Resisted acceleration, I'm going to go 8 to 10 sets. Again, more auto regulations everywhere. And what we're going to do with the weight on the sled, we're going to pyramid up to around 50% body weight is going to be the sweet spot for a lot of athletes. Over the course of, so around set 4 or 5, you want to hit 50% body weight. And then you can either stay there for the rest of your sets or you can pyramid back down if you want to get some exposures to higher velocities. That can be a really nice feeling as well. Ramping up to 50% and then bringing it down makes your athlete feel like lightning. So we'll just say overall ascending effort each set, over the course of like 3 or 4 sort of warm-up sets. Okay, then we've got to rip some bench press. Not enough weightlifters ripping their bench press year round. It's not going to ruin your overhead position as long as you're not benching 5 times a week and doing no overhead work. Could do top set back off method there. I'm just going to do straight sets. Let's go 3 sets of 5. Great time to rip our hammy work as well. A couple of ways you could go here. I'll always try to, in a 4-day split like this, where we've got acceleration and sprint work on day 2, I'll always try to hit my hamstrings straight after that, just so they've got a long time to recover. I don't want to leave RDLs for later in the week because I've got some heavy Olympic lifts later in the week that will probably be affected by them. So need to get them in as soon as possible. But let's just say RDL or hamstring curls, because what's going to decide this for your athlete could potentially be a couple of things, but the main thing that would decide this for me and my athletes is their tolerance to axial loading. So, or maybe even if they are tolerant to axial loading, I still may have reason to wanting to give them a break for some axial loading in certain sessions, whether it's like for freshening them up for things later in the week or just whatever reason. It could come down to just a strength or weakness thing as well. If my athlete's really good at Romanian deadlifts, but then they're stuck at like, the first quarter of the stack on the hamstring curl machine, I'm definitely going to feed them hamstring curls. If my athlete has terrible hinge mechanics, then I'm going to feed them the RDLs. Those, I would say 3 main variables to work that one out for yourself. Let's go 3. Assuming this is RDL, again, 3 sets of 5 will be great. Bench press, RPE 7 to 8. Hammy curls, week 1 would be sort of 6 to 7. I'd be looking to bump that up to 7 to 8, or again, if they're more technique focused, keep it down at 6 to 7 for a few weeks till it's looking how I like it, and then ramp them up to an 8. Because I did explain this in the last programming video, but if you haven't watched the last programming video, which I highly recommend, it was the video uploaded directly before this one, this is the golden microcycle. So the aim would be to follow this week of training exactly for 4 to 6 weeks without making any changes. Or you can make a couple of micro adjustments along the way, but we're sort of looking to get some valuable data from tracking the athlete response to this program. And you get the best data from just copy and pasting the same week of training. Then from there, you can start to push up RPEs or add or reduce the amount of sets to try and push the athlete in different directions to get different responses. But initially, we're just coming up with our general structure for the athlete and our general dose of all the qualities, and just to get some sort of idea of the individualized response from the athlete and some feedback from them. Accessory-wise, so we treated the previous session, accessory-wise, as a push session. This one is going to be our pull session. So a vertical pull, don't care if it's chin-ups, all that pull down, some other exercise you invented, and then horizontal. I've been enjoying for the horizontal pulls lately, Kelso shrugs. So that's where you do a horizontal row, but you're not bending at the elbow at all. It's just pure scapular retraction. I've been connecting with my upper back on them way more. Do normal horizontal rows, whatever. If you're a classic weightlifter, try to not do a barbell row, not because they're bad or anything like that, but just to break out of your habits. Go do a machine row. Make friends with the cable stack. It's good for weightlifters. Cables, machine squats, dumbbells, so good for weightlifters. Ideally up around 3 sets. I know we gave an athlete opportunity to get out of the gym a little bit quicker on this day. I think this workout's going to be a little bit shorter, so force them to do their 3 sets, because when you think about it, if they're getting 2 exposures to each of these body parts a week, it's not absolute bottom of minimum effective volume for a lot of people, but it is pretty low. So, if you're only doing 2 sets 2 times a week and your intensity and your quality really isn't there, you're probably not building much muscle. 3 sets 2 times a week, it's a bit of a safer bet unless you're like really locked in with your quality and intensity. Still very conservative on the volume. No reason to leave much in the tank. Got to push your accessories hard. And then let's go a lengthened bias curl. I've really been enjoying that one, leaning back against the GHD, or sitting backwards on the lat pull down and just arm humerus in line with the body, but all the emphasis is just more on the stretch. Curl. 3 sets, RP 10, no chance of leaving a rep in reserve. Rep ranges, I'm going to leave them blank because it literally just doesn't matter. But actually, no, what I will say is I do like a double progression. So let's just go 6 to 8, 6 to 8, 6 to 8. All right. Okay, this is a lighter day. This is definitely going to have one of our cardio exposures. So just a little bit of a side note before I program the light days for our cardio. I'm not going to program it. I'm not going to write it out specifically here, but at least 2 20 to 30 min exposures of zone 2, ideally more zone 3 on the bike. So I don't need you going out being a full-blown hybrid athlete, but not enough weightlifters are healthy people. There are so many weightlifters that are completely sedentary outside of the gym. And now we're starting to learn all these things about metabolic health and how it affects chronic pain, chronic injuries, especially your tendons and things like that when your blood sugar is always messed up. Or not that this is even related to that, because this is cardio in the gym. You should be trying to get you should be trying to get 8 to 10,000 steps in a day. You should be trying to eat good nutrition. You should be trying to get on top of your nutrition, and you should be doing a little bit of cardio. It just makes you a healthier person. As someone who's coached hundreds of people, I'm telling you, as a coach, the things I can program for healthy people are just insane. Versus trying to program for someone who's just generally unhealthy, it always feels like trying to thread a needle with the dose of training that'll drive progress, but that won't make them break down and develop some sort of knee tendinopathy. Versus, like I said, metabolically healthy people, you throw the kitchen sink at them and they're like, hey, give me more, coach. That was amazing. They're hitting PBs. Not that this is even tip of the spear in terms of a cardio prescription, but it's sort of just like a bare minimum to not be a bit of a piece of crap. You can't call yourself an athlete if you're not doing a little bit of cardio as a weightlifter. All right, anyway, 2 of those exposures a week. I think in the middle as well, like on the back end of this day, we'll throw it as a relaxing thing after your big Saturday. A little bit of light cardio just to finish the job. Okay, so days 2 and 4. No, sorry. Day 3 and 4. Look, like I said, put it wherever in the week. This is where we're putting it. Probably like realistically Thursday and then Saturday. Maybe this is on Friday. This is either Thursday or Friday, this session. Assuming this is like a Monday. Again, it's got to fit into your schedule, individualize it. Considering it's a light day and a lot of less experienced athletes with plyometrics will tend to thrash themselves when they're jumping and landing off of one leg, we're going to go 2 leaping variations here. So, I don't know, leaping variation 1. Leaping variation 2. Going to go 4 sets, so 8 sets total. We want 20 plus reps for all of these sets, low to medium. So if you're wondering if you're at the right intensity, on the lower side of medium, because we just want to get a lot of really nice snappy contacts. We've got a really cruisy front squat exposure, no top set, just straight sets, a little bit more clustery vibes. RPE 6 to 7, so just absolutely blitzing some comfy doubles. This is one of my favorite workouts for front or back squat, just 6 doubles, a real moderate intensity. Oh, cooking. Next, just for a bit of technique maintenance and conditioning the body to the lifts, muscle snatch. If you want, maybe add in overhead squat as well. So maybe muscle snatch, overhead squat, maybe just muscle snatch. I'll let you figure it out. Actually, no, let me make some decisions. Okay, we're just going muscle snatch, and we're going to go 3 sets of 2, and an RPE 8. So like get them going, having to move it with some intent, and then really, really aggressive, clean panda pulls. I want to do a decent amount of sets, at least 4 sets, 3 aggressive. For secondary bench, because we're absolute chads here, we're just going to go for DB bench or pec fly. 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 10. You go higher intensity if you're not going that many sets. Poliquin push down, because it's my tricep hyperfixation at the moment. 2 to 3, 8 to 10, RPE 10, because you would never leave a rep in reserve on those. All right, had to come inside because I was too far away from my modem. I'm recording this on Loom. So, all right, everyone's favorite day of the week, Big Friday or Big Saturday. I really like, even though it's a bit of a meme and it's, typically a thing that's done for the athlete, I like having a Big Friday, Big Saturday style workout in the program because it just gives you phenomenal data on where the athlete's at year round. So whether it's a 4-day or a 5-day program, they're the typical splits for my Olympic weightlifting athletes. Their last day of the program will always have some variation of a heavy snatch and a heavy clean and jerk and potentially a heavy squat as well. Because as much as I preach about general training and the value of general physical qualities, we still keep our eyes on the prize. So it doesn't matter that we train all qualities year round. The goal is to bring up snatch and clean and jerk. So we always have weekly testing on snatch and clean and jerk. Because even if our numbers are down, because we are in a more general phase of training, like more of an off-season phase, we still want to know where they're at. We still want to know how far we are away from competition shape year round, because it's such valuable data. Because as much as I preach the idea of taking things 1 week at a time, the one thing we always know is how many weeks we're out from competition and how our competition lifts are faring. Or if not how our competition lifts are faring, how our top end's faring. The big reason why as well with the programming style like this, I often find my athletes are ready to go year round. I can get pretty much all my athletes in competition shape in 4 weeks, maybe ideally 6 weeks with some of them. they need a bit more sustained, frequent, high volume exposure to their Olympic lifts to get really in shape. But yeah, for most people, honestly, 2 to 6 weeks and they're ready to go, even coming from a very general block of training. Anyway, fourth plyo warm-up for the week. It's going to have a little bit more of a bilateral bias as well, because again, more thinking of it in a priming sense, or warm-up then priming. So leaping variation, I might just go crescendo leaps again, but I'll sort of leave it up to you. But then broad jump. But specifically, I love all variations of broad jumps. Single leg broad jumps are great, but specifically because we're going to go into a big snatch and clean and jerk session and squat session, lateral broad jump. And so at the start, maybe just less repetitions, 1 to 2. But if your athlete's a little bit more advanced in terms of their plyometrics, up to 5 consecutive repetitions of broad jump. So in terms of sets, you can go pretty high with the sets. I would say at least 4 sets, but then anywhere up to 8, even 10 sets potentially if you want. So while we're still using this day to get information about where the athlete's competition top end is at, we're still in a bit of off-season flavor with this microcycle overall. So it's a heavy snatch and clean and jerk, but they're both still gonna have a constraint. Maybe the athlete's just been absolutely mong in their first pull. So we'll go pause 2 inches off the ground snatch, which I typically communicate as a low pause snatch. 2 inches off ground. So it's just going to get the athlete to spend more time in the first pull and just iron it out a little bit. Just wanted to build up to a heavy single, 9 to 10. Don't care if they get a miss or 2, or maybe, I would set rules with them depending on the athlete. Some athletes, I'd say no misses. As soon as you miss, move on. Other athletes, I'd be like, oh, no, if you miss twice, you can go again. Again, all can be individualized, communicated with the athlete separately. And honestly, one of my favorite complexes, power clean, full clean jerk to 10. So the power clean, for most athletes, the power clean is going to be a really great limiter there, but we're still getting max effort. And then we should see a really well executed and really technically well executed full clean after that. And hypothetically, if you want to go real off-season vibes with your athlete, you could go push, press before the jerk as well. I won't be for this program, just purely based off vibes, but know that things like that are an option. Trying to show you how flexible things can be, After that, top set and back off with back squat. One of the big things I used to push quite hard, I still push it, just not as aggressively as just not back squatting at all for Olympic weightlifters. It's not a competition movement. You don't have to do it. But that's also, I've gone back to programming it just because I don't want people to think that I think the back squats are a bad exercise. They're a phenomenal exercise, but Dylan, my strongest weightlifter, he doesn't back squat. He hasn't back squatted in years. Snatch 150, clean and jerk 186 kilos. Just front squats, machine squats, SSB squats. All right, and we'll go top single and an RPE 8 and some back off sets. We'll actually so traditionally we'll push the back off sets harder. On a day like today where they'll already be pretty tanked from the heavy snatch and clean and jerk attempts, let's actually just give them an RPE 6 to 7. So we'll get some volume that's moving really well. You make great strength gains on lower RPEs. We've got some really intense squatting in earlier periods throughout the week. And who knows how they're going to be feeling after a big session. So we'll go 3 to 4 sets to 4 to 6 reps, and RPE 6 to 7. Hopefully on the more 7 side. We're still trying to push hard. Oh no, it's week 1, so who cares if they go RPE 6? Again, next couple of weeks, you'd probably try to start pushing it a little bit. And there'd be nothing wrong with pushing them to an RPE 8 and above on the back offs on 1 or 2 weeks as you further into the cycle. And we'll go upper back superset for 3 sets, 8 to 10 reps, 9 to 10. So just upper back pump, lat pull downs, rows, second exposure to biceps. It can be a different exercise or the same one that we did for our previous bicep workout. Just stay on the lower rep side because it's fun. Not enough people explore lower reps for arms. Again, RPE 10. On one other thing, this is becoming quite a big session, but the idea is that it's at the end of the working week or it's on the weekend, so you might have a little bit more time. Just some really light core cable wood chops. 3 to 4 sets. 8 to 10 reps, just loosening up. RPE 7, nice and cruisy. All right, and there you have it. That is, 4-day weightlifting program with a little bit of a leg strength or a squat bias, 3 exposures to the squat. We've got front squat top set, and then machine squat back offs on day 1. On day 3, we've got a nice cruisy sort of cluster front squat workout. And then on our heavy day, we've got a back squat top set and then some solid back off sets as well. So some solid squat work there. Still touching on the Olympic lifts to a degree where I think a lot of athletes would make great progress, getting a lot of exposure to plyometric training, doing a healthy amount of accessory work for just overall muscular development, which is really underrated for a lot of weightlifters, and getting a nice amount of cardio in for general health, even though, it'd be nice to push this up a little bit if you're really taking your health and your weightlifting seriously. But there you have it. If you're still listening, I'm assuming that you really like the way I talk about programming. I rant about it every week, but I'm telling you, check out GPP Level 1. That's where to go if you really want to master the application of the concepts that I talk about on this channel. Also, I do have some one-to-one slots available for coaching. Whether you're interested in increasing your Olympic lifts or some other strength and conditioning related goals, go to my Instagram and fill out the form that's in my bio. And if you're still listening, then YouTube's probably recommending 2 different videos that you can go and watch that you'll really like. So go binge some of my content, leave a comment if you have a question, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.